Shalom! Hey, this is Dan. I want to talk to you about another Torah portion today. This one following in line from where we left off. Now, if you remember right, we left off last time learning about the Ark of the Covenant. We learned about the altar, all the tools that God told Moses to make in order to give him his just cause, in order to serve him properly. Well, I want to focus in on chapter 28 of this next portion. Now, altogether, the portion goes from Exodus 27:20 through 30:10. And I don't want to spend the whole time going over that. I want to charge you to read that, so to say. But I do want to focus in on chapter 28 because it's right here where we kind of pick up and we see that Moses is supposed to call Aaron and his sons toward him to consecrate them and get them in the business of getting ready to be priests. And one of the things that they do is they learn about the garments. Now, if you remember right, the Levites, they didn't get any land when the land was all split up. In fact, instead of getting land, they were given the ability of service to God. Now, that's something that we're all supposed to do. We're all supposed to serve God, but there was a specific capacity that these people were to do. And in order to do that, they had to have not only the tools, like we learned last time, but they also had to have the garments. So behind me, I got this poster I put together. We're going to talk about this. This is the breastplate. But altogether, there were a few different items that God told Moses to make for the priests. Now, these sacred garments, they're found in they start in, like I said, in chapter 28. But if we look at 28:2, it says that these garments were to give honor and dignity. Now, God wanted his people to stand out. God wanted the priests to be consecrated to him, and consecrated meaning to be holy. These people, they weren't supposed to be the sinners of the group. They were supposed to be the ones that were there for the times when the people did sin. Now, we'll learn later on that there was some sin that happened in the camp with the Levites as well. One of them, probably the biggest one we know about, was when they brought unholy fire in. But here we go. We start to see that God is calling these people out for a specific reason, and in order to do this specific reason, they have to have specific garments. The garments included a breastpiece, an ephod, a robe, a woven tunic, a turban, and a sash. And when we start to read past the general listing, we see that we begin to see the details of what these garments included. Let's start with the ephod, since that's the first one that comes in line. Now, the ephod was supposed to be a blue, gold, purple, scarlet yarn, twisted all together. Yarn and twisted linen. And they were to have 2 shoulder pieces attached to 2 corners. 2 onyx stones were engraved with the tribes. Now, there were going to be 6 names on each one of the stones. And then they were put into a gold filigree setting and put on the shoulder pieces. And then 2 braided chains of pure gold attaching the strings. Now, I have a picture, and I hope you're going to be able to see it. But as I talk about the different pieces, I want to kind of just show you more so what it looks like. And I do apologize if it's not one of the best pictures. I got this online, so feel free to find these pictures online as well. But basically, this is what we're going to try to be explaining here. So we start out with the ephod, and from there it talks about the breastplate. The next piece that comes up is the breastplate. Now, as I said, behind me here I have a breastplate that I kind of put together, and I do apologize because I just used origami paper and it's not perfect, but hopefully it kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. Now, the breastplate was made for Aaron and for the Levites, and it says here that in the Bible is for making decisions. And I looked up that word decisions, and it's mishpat, and that means it was there to serve for judgment, for justice, and ordinance. Now, again, God is very specific in how he wants things to be. And so not only did he tell them, here's the garments I want you to make, but check this out. He even told how he wanted this breastplate to look. Now, there are 12 stones, as you can kind of see behind me, and I apologize, this one here I didn't have any paper at all that matched this color, so it might be a little hard to see. But overall, I did the best I could here, and there were 12 pieces of paper, and these are 12 stones. Up here they're paper, but in real life they were stones, and they represented the 12 tribes. Now, I've seen different pictures. If you look at this picture here, it kind of shows the stones in a little different order than what I got here. And maybe not necessarily different order, but different colors. And I was thinking about this, you know, I don't know if you know, I don't know if you know Hebrew or anything like that, but when I was in college, I took some Hebrew classes, and they read the opposite of us. So if I'm looking at this and I'm reading this as a piece of paper, I would read this way. But the Hebrews actually read this way. And so I was beginning to wonder as I was comparing these two pictures here, and I thought, well, you know, some of these stones look like they're in the right place and some of them don't. And I was beginning to wonder if maybe when the Bible lists these names, could it be that they're listing them this way? Because when I read the stones, it begins to make a little bit more sense like that. Let me give you a little indication here. The first line says ruby, topaz, and beryl. That's what we read in the NIV. Now, some of these stones are going to have different names depending on what version of the Bible you read. Ruby, topaz, and beryl. Now, I can understand this being topaz, or at least the best I can find for a topaz stone. But, you know, I have to wonder, is this one the ruby and this one the beryl? Or is this one the ruby and this one's the beryl? And then the next line says turquoise, sapphire, and emerald. Well, I know for a fact that emerald happens to be a greenish type color, so I do wonder then if it's going this way. And I don't know, I'm just giving you some possibilities here, but the fact is that the stones were told to be put in a certain order. So the second row had the turquoise, sapphire, emerald. The third row has jacinth, agate, and amethyst. And the fourth line has crystallite, onyx, and jasper. And you can see that, you know, each one of these stones had a different color to it. Now, I want you to remember this though too. I talked about this before when we were learning about Joseph, and Joseph had this coat of many colors. And I told you at that point that it might have been possible that the reason the brothers got so jealous was not only because of his dreams about them all bowing down to him, but also because maybe he was wearing their color. So maybe it is that these stones represented the color that the tribe had. Well, obviously, it represented the tribe that the color had growing up, but were these the same colors that were used back in Joseph's brothers' days? You know, was this Reuben's color? Was this Simeon's color? I don't know. That would be kind of cool to find out. I might have to ask God that question when I get up there. But again, regardless of how it is, we see that the stones were to be put in a certain order. And each stone had the tribe's name etched on it. So let's say, for instance, that this was Reuben's stone, Reuben being the firstborn, then it would have Reuben etched on it. And this one would have Simeon, and this one would be next in line, and it would go all the way down. And so this was part of the breastplate that Aaron wore. And then the rings of the breastplate were tied to the rings of the ephod. The Urim and the Thummim were in the breastplate. They're over Aaron's heart. And this whole thing, excuse me, this whole thing was part of what helped Aaron to make the decisions. Now, from there, we move to the robe. And again, I'm just going to point this out to you. The robe was made out of blue cloth. So we can see from this picture here, this would be the robe. Here's the ephod down here. Here's the robe. Here's the breastpiece. And so, and it went a little bit longer than what I have here as well. But we can see that here's what we're talking about now, the robe. So it says that the robe was made out of blue cloth, and it had an opening for the head, and it's pretty much just one piece. And then on the bottom, and you don't see it so well in this picture, again, I'll kind of show you. You kind of see like a little fringe down here. Well, that fringe was actually bells and pomegranates, and they were pomegranates that not the real heavy fruit, but just a variation of it. Well, it says in the Bible here that it was made out of blue, purple, and scarlet material, and it was on the hem. So maybe kind of think of it like a crochet or some kind of little tassel or something in the shape of a pomegranate. And that's what was on the hem. And the sound of the bells, now they put the bells on there for a reason, the sound of the bells was heard when the person entered into the holy place before the Lord and when he came out. And it says in the Bible specifically, so that he will not die. Now, I remember as a kid seeing a video where these, it was a video about the New Testament, and the priests at that time going into the temple, and if they weren't clean, that they would die. And one of the ways that they knew whether the guy was still alive or not is they would tie this rope around him as he walked in, and so that would, because only a clean person could go in, and you pretty much didn't clean yourself until it was your time to go in, or you didn't have to clean yourself until it was your time to go in. And so there is this this thought that if they yanked the cord and they didn't hear your bells ringing or something, that there might be an indication that you weren't as clean as you thought, and you'd end up dying in the temple before God. I don't know if that's true or not, but it does seem to fit because it says in the Bible, so that you will not die. Now let's talk about the seal. The seal on the turban had the words "Holy to God," and it was attached with a blue cord on the turban, and this marked Aaron's head so that he was acceptable before the Lord. And then we have the tunic of linen and with the sash. And so, and again, I'll just show you this picture here. You can kind of see up here, Aaron's got his tunic on, and it's got this gold mark here. And one of the things it says off to the side here is it says that God's plate worn on the priest's head. And it was marked as holiness. It says atone for arrogance. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it has something to do. The point I wanted to make there is that there was that marking on the tunic there. So here we are near the end of chapter 28, and it has all the clothes listed. But you know, this is one of those things that's actually kind of interesting. God cares about so much detail that we read in Exodus 28:42 that God even gave Moses specifics for the priest's underwear. That's how detailed God is. Now, let's put this into present day real quick, because what God was showing me as I was reading through this, and this is why I want to kind of just focus on chapter 28 today, is because here we are, again, reading the details of what God commanded for the priests. And we are the temple of God. We read that in the New Testament. We are His chosen people. It even says that we are a peculiar people, chosen for God. Now, if God cares so much about clothing, how much more does He care about us? How much more, it even says in Matthew, it says, you know, God cares about the birds, and God cares about the grass, and it's here today and gone tomorrow. And how much more does God care for us? How much more does God want us to live these specifics that He has put in place for us? If God cares about the underwear that the priest wore, does He not care about you? If God gives specifics about the underwear that the priest wore, then does God not give us specifics to live by as well? Now the question is, in order for these priests to be able to serve, they had to obey this whole detail. They had to wear this breastplate. They had to wear the underwear. They had to wear the tunic. They had to do all these things before they could even step foot into the holy place. So how about this? Are we doing the things that God has told us to do? You know, if the priest walked in and he wasn't clean, he would die. We walk in. Are we walking in, though, clean? Now, the great thing is, just as we will learn about these different sacrifices and such when we get to Leviticus, is that God made a way for us to be clean. And I want to encourage you with that. I want you to know that I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. I'm sure that I've sinned today. When you're watching this, my son's in the background nodding his head. And so I'm sure that I've done something today. But the great thing is that God forgives us. He cares about the fine-tuned details of our life. And He wants us to twist those things into the way, the purposes, and the plans that He has. So here's the deal. Are we doing it? Are we living the life that He has for us? Are we doing the things He has us to do? Are we giving our best to the specifics that God has in place? Only you can answer that for yourself. Hey, I'm Dan. Shalom.